And if you're serving a community and then also accepting money, which by taking that money means you can't speak out in support of that community and rally against things that might be harming that community, how much is that money serving your community then? Like, is it just there so you can meet your targets? Is it just there so you can meet your goals? Yeah, you can't serve your mission at the same time as accepting money that holds you back from your mission and holds you back from serving your community.
Hi, friends. Ever wondered how you could turn your big ideas into results? Together, let's reimagine a better sector, tackle systemic issues, and yes, raise some serious cash. Welcome back to The Small Nonprofit, the podcast where your passion meets action. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Small Nonprofit Podcast, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Mary Rio, and I'm a fundraising expert with over a decade of fundraising experience, and I'm on a mission to make sure that EDs get more money without the stress. And I'm joined by Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin McBride. If you're new to the podcast, I'm a certified fundraising executive. I also have over a decade of experience, and I'm really here to make fundraising feel less chaotic and more doable for small nonprofits.
Today, we're going to be talking about how funders can use money to actually muzzle your organization's advocacy. So, like censorship around advocacy and times where we've seen that come up in our careers. So, I'm sure that our listeners have also experienced this, but at a time with increased polarization and politicking of everything that we do, I think censorship is a great topic for us to be discussing.
Do you think podcasts will still be allowed by the time this comes out?
They're actually talking about regulating that. They're like, these are
Okay.
unregulated spaces and we really don't want to have, free speech anymore. So
Oh, who needs that?
might as well use it while we still can.
Yeah, exactly. All right, everybody, enjoy these episodes.
Enjoy our free speech. Okay, first I want to talk about, have you seen this in your career where there is outsized pressure, outsized control by a donor, or even by another power holder in the community? So it could be maybe like a politician as well, trying to exert undue influence over the organization. Have you seen that before?
Less so in terms of the political side of things and trying to exert that pressure. I think I've seen that with politicians trying to insert themselves into fundraising activities and some photo ops usually. Yeah, I think we've also kind of saw that like with one of our clients. Yeah, a situation where organization we were working with was basically kind of lured into a conflict with a politician, and then that politician like use that conflict to further their very divisive viewpoints and essentially play the victim card. So that was yeah, and in a very public stage as well. So that was not fair and not fun to watch. But what about you? Have you seen anything particularly on the political side?
I have definitely at least one time we had a farmer's market and the staff person had been removed from that position for various HR things that we couldn't explain to the general public. However, this politician was saying, I'm getting some complaints because people really like the staff person and they're gone. So they tried to kind of like grab the farmer's market and give it to that staff person. So take it away from the organization and have it run externally by that staff person. So really tried to put pressure on the organization to just do that because it would have been favorable with his constituents. But it was not in the best interest of like basically anyone but that former staff person.
Yeah, that's really disappointing to see. Was there a funding agreement in that particular situation, or was it just like a political?
That one was more just a political person trying to
Mm,
exert power over the
mm.
organization. There are kind of risks that you think that could come up, right?
Yeah, it is a risk, and especially if you're an organization that does get government funding. I think there is like additional pressure to appease politicians and have those photo ops and everything, even if it isn't to the benefit of your community and can sometimes harm it as well. But yeah, I've been in a situation where it was actually a particular like funding agreement, which maybe I'll get into a little bit later in that. But I'm gonna just preface this for our listeners, there are going to be some things in this where like we're still kind of being muzzled by this, and we do have to be really careful with what we say because there is still that power, unfortunately, that funders and bigger organizations and everything hold. Yeah, it feels like this is sometimes like a live example of that muzzling continuing. I think there was something that you had flagged when we were chatting a bit more. You're in Ontario, so you're very familiar with OTF, which is Ontario Trillium Foundation. Do you want to dive into that story a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Ontario Trillium Foundation is a pretty big granting body in the province that I'm in Ontario, Canada. Hello to all of our American and Canadian listeners. But basically, they provide a lot of funding. And Gabe Oatley from Future of Good did an investigation, I think in around 2021, around some of the clauses that were in the funding agreements that OTF, the Ontario Trillium Foundation, was having organizations sign. And one of those clauses explicitly said you cannot do advocacy against the government, which was interesting because Gate found that this was a newer added clause after Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, was elected to become Premier. And he had two people who helped get him into that position of power become board members on the OTF board. So Gabe did this investigation, talked to a bunch of organizations who had signed this agreement that said, like, I'm not going to do advocacy, and then actually called out this practice, which then 2 years later, after this investigation, ended up having this clause removed. So now for organizations that are receiving that funding, they're able to continue their advocacy work. But it really made me think about how many times organizations are taking money at all costs first. Second, not really taking the time to think about the repercussions that come with that short-term thinking, those short-term gains. Like, yes, maybe Ontario Trillium gave you $200,000, which is a lot of money. We're not going to say that's not a lot of money. That's a shit ton of money. But is it worth your reputation? Is it worth your community members like dignity and autonomy? Is it worth like being seen as lukewarm by anyone who is looking to you for your leadership and your advocacy, your allyship, your solidarity? Is $200,000 worth that? And I feel like some organizations may say yes, but when we really sit down and think about it in our hearts and our minds, like it doesn't feel right. Not to me, anyway.
Yeah, and if you're serving a community and then also accepting money, which by taking that money means you can't speak out in support of that community and rally against things that might be harming that community. How much is that money serving your community then? Like, is it just there so you can meet your targets? Is it just there so you can meet your goals? You can't serve your mission at the same time as accepting money that holds you back from your mission and holds you back from serving your community.
It's debilitating for a lot of these organizations. They don't know exactly where to go from there, which is kind of sad. I'm sure that there's funders out there who are saying, like, you cannot discriminate against people in your programming. And, they're using verbiage like that. They're adopting verbiage like that to actually attack DI initiatives. So, for example, if you are an organization that provides services specifically for Black mothers, and you sign something that says, I'm not going to discriminate against anyone in my programming, this funder might turn around and be like, okay, so I want you to include all these white men in your programming. Right. So, really thinking through those implications and those clauses and funding agreements, I think are very, very important. And actually, there's a story that you mentioned that I thought was really, really interesting. I would love if you could share it with our audience.
Yeah, for sure. Your mention of clauses and funding agreements is just so critical there. And yeah, this is a few organizations ago and everything, but I actually had it was a funder who was a longtime funder. So this was not like a new funding relationship or anything, but we, applied for our yearly grant and yay, we're successful. And then we noticed that they had added a new clause to the funding agreement. And that clause aligned our organization with a particular, I'm being careful here, a particular political ideology that we were an apolitical organization, so we did not align with any particular ideology. But, I think what really went over the line here was that it also prevented not only our organization, but our leadership team and our board from speaking out against that ideology and against that way of thinking. So it really muzzled not just the organization's brand, but the individuals that served our organization and prevented them from speaking out against causes that they believed in or causes that they wanted to fight for. And, I won't say that this was like one of these great years where we had all the funding and, this was an easy decision. Like this was funding we were relying on for this program. And it was a really important program and it made a difference to our community. And it was a really hard decision. Like as soon as I saw that clause, I was like, this is not okay. This is not something that we can do. But I'm not going to say that that was still an easy decision to turn that down. And I did like take it to the board and it was a lot of discussions at the board level. It was a board level decision, so there was only so much I could do. But I did make it clear that if they did move forward and decide to accept this funding, that I would no longer hold that relationship. That was something that they needed to do on their own because I would not be connected with that foundation anymore. And yeah, it was a very tough situation. I'm very proud of our board for making the decision and saying no to the funding. We didn't say no immediately. We actually went back and tried to kind of find a middle ground. We were like, we can't agree to this. Here is some revised language that we can agree to. And they didn't agree to that. So we said, then, we have to turn down this funding. And unfortunately, it didn't end there. We did get a lot of backlash from the community, got some angry phone calls that had to deal with. And, this is a large funder in the area where I live. And I'm being careful about what I say because I don't want any of the organizations who have maybe made a different choice to face repercussions based on their relationship with me. So I'm being careful because I've already felt some of those repercussions and already felt some of that backlash, and I don't want to put that on any other organization. So it was a difficult decision. And at the same time, when we were going through it, I just kept on thinking of like, what's the alternative? The alternative is signing this. And there's no way that's going to happen. We served a very diverse community, diverse like ethnicities and ideologies and viewpoints and worldviews. And we also respected the right of everybody in our organization to speak out and uphold their own values and to speak out about the causes that they believed in. This is this is one of the most extreme examples that I've seen and been through of an organization literally using their money and their power to silence not only the organizations, but the people that work within them.
And this isn't an isolated example, right? Like we've seen this with like even like sexual harassment of Liz Leclerc, who is a pretty big name in the Canadian fundraising landscape of like she was being harassed by a donor, but because the donor kept giving, the organization wanted to kind of sweep it under the rug and muscle her. So make sure that she wasn't speaking against what was happening, right? So it takes a lot of courage to speak out first. But I think it's also the important thing to do because the performativeness that nonprofits very easily settle into by saying, like, we believe in this, but behind closed doors, what you're signing, what you're agreeing to, what you're putting at risk.
Yeah. Is it worth it? Yeah. And I will say that, like, at the end of this, because it can be such a hard decision to do this and to have that courage and to say no, not just for that relationship and like the risks that you put out there, but also because like we lost that funding. Like we didn't have that funding in our budget anymore. But I do want to say that like we were okay. Like we found another way to fund this very important program. And we did so, with our integrity intact and upholding the values that we held dear and, you know, acting in a way that was aligned with like our value of transparency. So I just want to put that out there to reassure people that it is a hard decision and it does set you back, but in the long run, you'll be okay. And this is something that, like, I don't think this clause would have ever been made public. I don't think that anybody would ever, it wasn't something that was out there, but I think we should always be acting as if everything is public and everything is out there. And you don't just do something because other people are seeing it. Like you do the right thing even if it's behind closed doors. Like you have to.
If something costs you your integrity, the price is not worth it. And like we're seeing this with like individual donors, independent donors running their family foundations, but we're also seeing this on a larger scale with the states, right? We're seeing the whole defunding of organizations that support trans rights and support equality broadly through the defunding of USAID. I wonder what you think those kind of like longer term and bigger challenges are when organizations decide, like, I'm going to take the funding regardless of the clauses. I'm going to mellow down my advocacy so I can get the money in through the door and feed people, clothe people, put them in shelters, whatever it is.
Like it doesn't, it feels like a band-aid solution at that point. Like it, yes, yeah, okay, you are serving an urgent need, but you're not serving the root of that need. Do you know what I mean? Like you're like keeping this community in this cycle of need when you're not addressing the bigger, when you're not allowed to, or you're muzzled by, like you're not able to address those bigger systemic issues and advocate for this community and actually make change at a much larger level, you're going to be continuing to provide housing, provide food, and provide shelter because you're keeping them at that level. It's like those things I always get frustrated with where homelessness prevention organizations will be like, we've been around for 20 years. Let's make sure we're around for 20 more. Like, no, like your goal should be to make sure that you're not needed and you don't exist. So if you're just taking that money, how are you actually serving your community? How are you making that real change that's going to make a long-term difference?
When I first started fundraising at Public Outreach, there was this line that I would say to donors. Again, I was like 19 or 20, don't judge poor little tiny Maria. But like my line was always like, oh, if you care about this cause, you're telling me you care about this cause. If you care about it and you don't fund it, people who don't care about it aren't going to fund it. So I would say the same thing to nonprofits. Like if you care about this cause, if you don't advocate for it, people who don't care about it are not advocating for it. And actually, the alt-right, the extremist right people are advocating very ferociously for what they believe in. And we're just coming back super lukewarm, super easy to censor, easy to muzzle because we're not willing to actually stand up and like do the right thing in public and in private.
I'm just nodding because I just agree. I got nothing. That's amazing. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about what the right thing looks like. So I love your example because one of the things that you illustrate is you can't say no to a gift. That's allowed. That's allowed and encouraged if it's misaligned with your values.
And you'll be okay. I think as fundraisers too, we do things short term. Like we think about this year's goals. We think about getting to this target and we think about, the year over year progress and like revenue increases and everything. But, if we just keep thinking in this like short term mindset, then we're just stuck. That's all we're thinking about. And if you're thinking about it longer term, then like, yes, maybe your year over year revenue projections are going to be a little bit off or you'll be down a little bit, but your organization is going to be stronger for it. Your community is going to be stronger for it. And your mission is going to be stronger for it. And we did find another way to fund this program and we got the money. It just took a little bit longer.
Plus, I feel like you can have more like self-respect. I'm a leader that does like I make the hard choices and I make the right ones, even if it's difficult. I don't know. I think that that's really personally important to me to be able to sleep easy at night, knowing that I tried my best and that I'm living in alignment with my values as much as possible. So turning down the gift is a good opportunity. Something else that you can do is definitely read the agreements. But for people who found out about this OTF thing a year later, what were you doing? Right? Read the agreements. Make sure that you are reviewing it carefully. And something else that I want to say here is that your board member who's a lawyer is not your lawyer. Like you brought them in because you wanted this legal advice. They said they were going to give you legal advice. That's all good. Most of them, when push comes to shove, will say, "Oh, but I'm not your lawyer. I don't have an agreement with you, so I can't give you legal advice." So follow through with that and actually retain a lawyer outside of your board to review an agreement if you are unsure. If you think it could jeopardize your mission, this is a very, very tiny cost to pay versus what you could pay later down the road.
Love all of that. And I will add, in addition to like reading the gift agreement carefully, like don't be afraid to ask questions. This like story that I'm telling and everything, it was very crystal clear in the gift agreement what this was saying. Whereas like some gift agreements will be a little bit more shady about what they're restricting. So really understanding, okay, what do you mean by advocacy? Like what do you mean by X, Y, and Z? And don't be afraid to do that. Like I think that we have this fear of donors and fear of like funders that if we speak out or push back at all, that it's going to destroy our organization or, even more short term, we're not going to hit our year over year like revenue goals. But we are connecting with funders in order to make their missions happen. Like we have power in this as charities and as organizations. So don't be afraid to question things that are in there, especially new additions. And yeah, speak out against it if it isn't something that aligns with your values.
I think getting clarity on your values is also super, super important because once you have clarity on your values, you can actually gain clarity on your boundaries. And we talk about boundaries a lot as a, person to person thing, but boundaries are there to protect you and your peace as a person. So, what are your boundaries as an organization that protect you and your peace and your mission from undue influence? So, when a politician comes knocking, when Amazon wants to give you $2 million, do you know what you would do and how you would also talk about it with your community? Because another thing that I see that pisses me off is when EDs make these choices and then kind of like hide it away from the whole organization. No one else knows except the board and the ED. The community doesn't know. The staff, when they find out, they're like, I would not choose to work here if I knew that's the kind of culture that we were supporting.
Yeah, if you value transparency, then like you have to talk about it and you have to be clear about it. And as I said, we should be doing everything as if it is going to be public. Like 100%. Like even if it's very unlikely that your donor base is going to find out about this or your community is going to find out about it, just pretend like everything is laid out there and is going to be public because it might be. And even if it's not, as I said, like you got to do the right thing, even if it's behind closed doors.
And something that I find interesting about your story is that, like, you didn't tell other people, we didn't sign this gift agreement because of X, Y, and Z. This was a trusted partnership that you had. That trusted partner was the one that told other people. So even if your organization is not sharing that you are signing on with Amazon or something like that, Amazon might share it on your behalf.
Yes, you're so right. And because we were thinking about that implication as well, that if we sign on with this and we align with them and with like this like ideology and everything, then like they also have the power to put us on their website and to say we supported all these organizations that also agree with us and then we'd be named there and we had no control and no power over that. So you are entering into a partnership when you agree to take money and you're giving them something too. And that is alignment with who you are and your brand and your community and your mission. You have to think about that carefully.
Any other tips that you would give to someone who's thinking about how to make sure that they're not putting their advocacy at risk by giving donors or politicians outsized control over their organization?
It's such a good question. Something we talk about a lot is trying to grow unrestricted revenue sources so that you're not putting yourself in these situations, like growing things like individual giving and individual giving revenue, where you're fundraising from your community and not just relying on the pockets and the whims and the like values and ideologies of particular foundations slash like major donors. So really kind of like having that diversity of revenue and carefully questioning everything and questioning like what is benefiting your community and what is harming your community. We as fundraisers and as like charity leaders and everything need to get out of this 1 year cycle of short-term thinking and stop just thinking about ensuring that consistent revenue growth if it's not actually solving the mission or like the problem that your organization is there to solve if you are continually feeding back into it. What about you?
A lot of us get into this space because it aligns with our personal values, with our identity, with the change that we want to see in the world. I think if there is a decision that's making you feel uneasy, trust your gut. Like your gut knows this doesn't feel right. So listen to yourself and change it, right? Like the more that you live in alignment with your values, first of all, that's so good for you, right? Like feeling like you belong, feeling like you're in the right spot, feeling like other people understand and see you for who you are. Great. I think you want to bring that same kind of mentality to your organization. So really making it clear, like, what are our values? Where do we belong? Who are the people that belong with us? And how can we move forward together in the same direction? You'll know when something feels off. So listen to that and remove it from the equation because it's not serving you.
I love that. Don't underestimate your power in the organization. As I know, there's probably situations where there's maybe been one person who's thought, oh, this doesn't feel good. And then they had to give in to pressure from board, from like higher ups. But as I said, like in my example there, like this was a board level decision. So it could have very easily gone a different way despite all of my efforts. But I did make it clear that I was going to live in my values and that if we proceeded with a relationship with them, even as a fundraising person, I would not be the one holding that relationship because that was not in alignment with my values. So that it put some more pressure on because that made their daily lives harder if I wasn't going to be taking that work on.
You want me to hang out with this person when you wouldn't hang out with them?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I hope that this episode triggered some thoughts for you because there's a lot of people who are going through this currently, especially our American friends, but also here in Canada too, we're seeing this where funders are trying to exercise outsized control over an organization as political storms get stronger. So, really standing your ground is very important, being in alignment with your values and making sure that you can continue to serve your community in a way that best serves your needs is really, really important. Like always, if you want to watch this episode, you can see our lovely faces on YouTube. Please like, comment, and subscribe over there. Tell the algorithm that you want to continue seeing this content. But that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. We super appreciate you. Until next time, bye for now. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Small Nonprofit. If you want to continue the conversation, feel free to connect with our guests directly or find me on LinkedIn. Let's keep moving money to mission and prioritizing our well-being. Bye for now.